Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Last session of the conference, and I know what that's like. It's you deserve extra CPE credits, I think, for coming at the end of the day. How many of you were in the last session that just ended before this? Interesting. It was an excellent session. I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to hear radically different concepts. You're going to hear coming to the same conclusion from a completely different perspective. So if you didn't like the last session, you probably won't like this one either. But if you're here, I'm assuming you liked it. So I complimented Michael on the quality of the session, and we're going to get in touch afterwards. So thank you for coming. My name is Bruce McQuaig. 2 years ago today, I joined SAP. It's my 2-year anniversary. I had been in a period of kind of self-imposed independent consulting for a period of time, and I thought, marketing, it sounds easy. I'll come back and do some marketing for the money they're going to pay me, no problem at all. So I actually didn't put SAP on there. I was trying to go undercover, but I have to tell you, I'm SAP Solution Marketing based in Toronto, Canada. My colleague, who's going to do the other part of the presentation, is Bob Tizio. You can see his title up there. He'll explain it better than I will, but I didn't meet Bob before this presentation. We're actually doing 2 separate independent presentations that coincidentally and fortuitously fit together very nicely. Just like yours, I think we're going to fit together had your presenter turned up, and you did an admirable job. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is this. I'll be spending about maybe 15 minutes, and here's what I'm going to cover. I'm going to cover some research findings that we compiled. Some of the research we did ourselves. Talk to you about it. There's maybe 8 or 9 slides that come up with some results in terms of what the state of enterprise risk management is today, what people are saying about it, what people are thinking about it, what people are doing about risk management today. They don't come to a crystal clear conclusion. So I'm going to try to see if I can synthesize and summarize the state of risk management today based partly on my experience and partly on the statistics and the results of the surveys that you'll see. I'm then going to propose a really simple strategy for enterprise risk management. I can express it on one slide in 3 simple concepts, and I can explain them and expand on them. And then I'm going to talk about 10 questions that enterprise risk management must answer. That's on one slide too. I'm not sure I'm going to spend much time on that slide. You can look at it yourselves when you get the copy of the presentation. The slide I want to focus on in the center of my presentation is right here. After I'm finished, Bob's going to talk, and Bob's going to, I guess, introduce his speech a little more eloquently than I will, but basically he's going to tell you about the evolution of enterprise risk management at SAP. We actually do enterprise risk management at SAP. We've been doing it for a long time, and he'll explain to you how it works and how it's evolved. So that's where we're going today, and so let me begin. I'm going to run through these slides fairly quickly. No point getting into a lot of detail and analysis because I'm going to kind of put together a composite picture at the end. So everybody likes risk management. This particular piece of conclusion came from our own research. We surveyed 220 clients around the world who did not use our solution, by the way, 220 clients who used SAP products but not risk management that we sell. And we surveyed them and interviewed a number of them directly. Everybody thinks risk management is important. Not everybody, but certainly a large proportion of the audience thought it was important. And of those, a lot of people thought it was going to get more important as time went on. In spite of that, and there's contradictions you'll see as we go through this, they weren't investing in technology. And as a technology provider, that's important to us. We want people to invest in technology. And they weren't doing it. 50% of the companies are using outdated risk management solutions. By outdated, I mean they're more than 5 years old. By outdated, I mean there are, frankly, a lot of spreadsheets out there that people are using. So we said, that can't be right. What's going on here? We found that people, this is an OSEG survey that we sponsored, Open Compliance and Ethics Group. It was a survey I don't know about how many hundreds of responses they got to the survey. You can go to their site and actually get a copy of it. They found that clients felt they didn't have a clear enterprise view of their risk exposures. 53%, 54% didn't have a clear view, and you can see the statistics that they came up with in terms of their survey. So people think it's important. They aren't investing in technology. They're not getting a clear exposure of their risks. They're not getting a clear list of the risk exposures. Things are sneaking up on them and hurting them because they don't understand the risk. They're getting caught. 68% of organizations, and this came from the North Carolina State Enterprise Risk Management Initiative by Mark Beasley and Bonnie Hancock. It published recently as well. We have permission to use that. Businesses are using both quantitative and qualitative techniques to assess the risks. There isn't any one right way. There are quantification people and qualitative people, and both of them are in play, which suggests perhaps a variety of tools might be useful to those folks for using those different types of risk assessment methodologies. People are building risk inventories. They're building them slowly, but they're building risk inventories. There's good things about that, and there's bad things about that. I think we talked about risks, or we heard about risks in the previous presentation, and risks that are captured and inventoried without a context of objectives or strategies aren't particularly useful. You have to have some objectives or strategies to understand your risks. They have to link to each other. I have seen clients in my days before SAP that come to me and say, I have 12,000 risks in my risk library. And I say, good for you, but the chances are you don't have a risk library, you have a risk cemetery. Because there's absolutely no way you can manage 12,000 risks unless there's some kind of taxonomical structure, which often there isn't. There isn't a definition of what a risk is or how they're organized. You can't organize that information without a lot of structure. So that's a good thing and a bad thing. Is your business ready to decrease risk and increase productivity? Well, who's going to say no to that? I sat at the table at lunch and it was marked recurring revenue and best practices, and somebody asked me if I was at the right table, and I said, well, if it's recurring revenue and best practices, I'll sit here, sure. It's like the same kind of question we're getting here. But people believe that 60% of respondents indicated that integrating processes and reducing gaps in risk and compliance procedures would decrease risk and increase productivity, and 42% that said it would reduce redundant activities. So we're getting a mixed picture here. People think it's good, people think it's getting more important, but people aren't investing in it. People aren't necessarily adopting the practices that would reduce the risk exposure or reduce the incidence of operational risk. But 90% said, in answer to this question by OSEG, is your company ready for an integrated enterprise-wide solution for risk management? 90% said that where they tried and attempted an integrated approach to risk management, they exceeded their expectations. So the people who did move down that road were quite happy with it. So we're left with the conclusion, what's going on? I've been in the risk management business as a consultant and a practitioner for most of the last 20 years. I've spent, days in boardrooms writing on flip charts, risks, and pasting them on the walls. I've seen spectacularly successful risk management initiatives that burnt out in 3 to 6 months. I've seen others that didn't even get that far. And so what's going on? So I put this chart together to kind of explain, from my perspective, some of the critical elements of a profession, a sustainable, repeatable practice, and I've kind of summarized in here. Certified professionals, there really isn't any standard global certification for risk management people. I was doing some work with a risk management professional in Australia back a few years ago. I didn't know the guy very well. He insisted on being called Dr. Joe, whatever his name was, doctor. He was pretty good, no problem with him. And at the end of the assignment, which lasted a couple of weeks, I asked him what his PhD was, and he said, veterinary medicine. So there's all kinds of people in the risk management business. I looked at my professional mailing from the, I'm a CA, Chartered Accountant in Canada, and they sent me a list of the curriculum of courses that they offer in this particular provincial institute. I looked for risk management courses, there weren't any. There are, of course, courses, there are ways you can get certified, but there isn't anything quite as standard as an engineer or a CA or CPA or those sorts of things. There's no standardized methodology, and our survey also delved into this, how people do it. There's nothing standardized about the methodology for risk management. There really is little to nothing in the way of independent audits of risk management information, unlike financial statements, and I'm comparing this, of course, to financial management versus risk management. There's occasional sporadic board involvement in the risk management process and the risk oversight process. There isn't anything near that we could call standardized reporting. There isn't any reporting framework. You've seen heat maps, and we'll talk about some of those things in a few minutes, but there really isn't any accepted way. You know what you're going to get, basically, when you put together a set of financial statements. There's a certain way of portraying information, balance sheets, P&Ls, cash flow statements, those sorts of things. But there isn't any really standard way of reporting on risk. In terms of supporting technology, my conclusion, and I think the conclusion of others, is obviously there's supporting technology in financial management, and there is a huge amount of supporting technology in the risk management business, but the risk practitioners aren't using it, or they're using technology that some of the solution providers like ourselves think they shouldn't be using, which can perhaps be a contradiction. So technology is not impeding things. One has to conclude that there's other factors in play that put this situation in the state it's in today. So what are some of those factors? Certainly we're still siloed after all these years. I think it's fair to say that risk management activity takes place across a variety of silos. It's difficult to allocate resources or allocate methodologies or to aggregate the information that comes out of those silos, and that's an old problem that probably isn't going to go away quickly. Another problem is this, what I would call the control paradigm approach to risk management. A number of years ago I lived in Houston, Texas. I lived just outside the Houston city limits, and we had a volunteer fire department, which I joined the volunteer fire department. And so I went with one of the more experienced volunteer firemen to do a school inspection. Obviously, we wanted to make sure schools were safe and wouldn't burn down, so we did a school inspection. And I figured we'd be looking for fire extinguishers. Firemen should look for fire extinguishers, right? Well, I found out that that's not at all what they did. They have a theory, or at least they discovered, I guess it's not much of a discovery, it's a fact that there's physics involved in fires. If you don't have a flammable material and a source of ignition and oxygen, you will never have a fire. So we didn't look for fire extinguishers, we looked for flammable materials and sources of ignition. That's what we looked for. Now the point is this, that much of the risk management profession today is using a control paradigm. Let's find a risk and throw a control at it. Let's not understand what the cause of the risk is, what's driving the risk, what factors contribute to the risk in combination or individually. Let's not do root cause analysis, let's do this. If you look at Sarbanes-Oxley, which is something you're all familiar with, I guess, there's really very little talk about root cause analysis, very little talk about risk drivers, very little talk about risk itself. The definition of risk in that accounting document or the auditing standard is the absence of a control. And it's a primitive example, perhaps, maybe even a clumsy example, but I think if you're relying on fire extinguishers, you're surrendering to fire. Because you're going to have a fire, because the fire extinguisher is not useful unless you have a fire. But if you don't want fires, you have to look at this kind of stuff. You have to look at root cause analysis, and you have to monitor risk advance, and you have to get involved in key risk indicators and those predictive kinds of activities. But a lot of what we're doing here is control-based. And a lot of the methodologies I've seen seem to exist for the purpose of identifying a risk and slapping a control on it. I have an SAP iPad in my briefcase there, and SAP was very early purchaser of iPads, bought thousands of them, probably one of the biggest purchasers of iPads from Apple. The problem I have with my SAP iPad is that our IT people thought it was a security risk. So every 5 minutes, it goes off. I could stand here and do a demo of a product or do this presentation based on the content on the iPad. I would be punching in my number every 5 minutes to turn that thing back on again. I sent IT a letter. I said, look, I promise if you extend that to at least 15 minutes, I'll tie it to a brick. And they never answered me, actually, but that's a control-based approach. I have no idea what the risk is. I don't know who decided what the risk was, but somebody decided that the risk was so severe they would limit to 5 minutes the use of an iPad before it blacked out again. So that's one concept that I thought was useful. It's not that these approaches, not that that approach is wrong, it's just that you need both. I'm not advocating the demolition of controls, I'm just saying you need to look at it from both perspectives and decide what appropriate mix and proportion is appropriate. Risk reporting is evolving. I talked about risk a moment ago, and we had some discussion about risk earlier in the earlier presentation by Michael. And the point was made, I'll make the point again, that if you talk about risks in the absence of objectives or in the absence of strategy, you don't get much learning from that. What I call this, somewhat facetiously, is not risk management, it's risk admiration. Unless you can decide how the risk impacts your business objectives and your strategies, it's really not risk management. It's just really admiring these risks. So you have to, this kind of chart, this kind of heat map, I think, comes from that perspective. And without a context around it, and we saw examples in the previous presentation as well, we have to find better ways to report risk. Another thing that I talked about, or I want to talk about, and this is the ISO 31000 risk management standard. How many of you are familiar with the ISO 31000? Heard a bit about COSO in the last session. It's 30 pages long. This makes the point again, there's a lot of time spent here identifying the risk and analyzing the risk. There's a little corner of the ISO 31000 risk management standard that says, okay, now that you know about those risks, to the extent you have controls, how effective are they? What risks are emerging? What issues, what incidents, what KRIs, what objectives, what risk levels, what impacts, are you seeing with respect to those risks you've identified over here? And I don't think I have seen much of that kind of activity taking place. Most of the activity I've seen is over here. But if you're not looking at this kind of stuff, I think you're missing some information as well, and it's something that you really have to spend some time looking at. So, simple strategies. Let me see if I can boil this down. I think these are the three basic questions. The first one is, what's the fundamental value of the business? So what is it that equity analysts look at when they value your company's shares? What is it? What are your executives compensated on in their incentive compensation plan? An example would be, I spent a number of years working for an oil and gas company, and we didn't have a formal risk management program, but if you looked at what our controls were focused on inventory in refineries and pipelines and vessels and in tank farms. That's where the controls were. So one could conclude that the major risk we were dealing with was somebody stealing our inventory. What is the basis for valuing an oil and gas company, an upstream exploration production company by a stock analyst? It's oil and gas reserves. We didn't spend any time really looking at controls or risks over oil and gas reserves, but that's what drove our value. I read an article by an analyst, an equity analyst. It was written a number of years ago. It was a research report on airlines, and they concluded that the thing that drove, or would in the future drive, the value of airlines was the customer experience. Not the age of the fleet, not the routes they flew, customer experience. And so they had to find a way to assess how customer experience was impacted. So much of risk management activity in my mind has been focused on things that don't matter. You can't add value through risk management unless you understand the value of the business in the first place and focus your activity on that. And that might be 15, 20% of the total activities in the company. I've done risk management workshops at clients' requests. They pay me for this on payroll. Well, we know payroll has to be done correctly. We know it's important. We know it's a big number. But if your payroll department can't provide a payroll properly, fire somebody. Hire somebody who can get it done. Don't spend time focusing on risk management on activities that don't matter. Focus on value. Once you understand the value, you have to understand what drives that value. So what drives customer experience in the views of this equity analyst on the airline industry? The customer experience that was driven by the ability of the airline to integrate seniority lists, incentive programs, training programs, all those sorts of things. The human resources behind, the service staff that actually had customer-facing experience. So from a risk management perspective, what can go wrong? An oil and gas business whose equity is valued on proved reserves in the ground, that proved reserve number in the ground is driven by exploration activities, acquisition activities, geological activities, and you have to understand those things and how they work. So my view is that if you can identify where the value of your business is and what drives that value, then the goal of risk management is to provide some insight into how that value is created and destroyed in the processes that are linked to that value driver. That's what it is. And my experience is that perhaps 80 to 90%, and I'm not exaggerating, but it's a long period of time I'm calling that number, 80 to 90% of the risk management activities I've seen have absolutely nothing to do with the value of the business. Absolutely nothing. They're driven by financial transactions, administrative departments. They're not value focused at all. And I think that lack of a value focus is probably what's driven probably what's interrupted the take-up of risk management generally. Any risk management approach whose only goal is to add controls will simply add cost. Risk responses must reflect risk appetite. The third thing you have to do, and I call it number 3 because a lot of people have it number 1, The third thing I think you have to do as a risk manager is look at the horizon and look over your shoulder and look for things that can cause catastrophic loss or some major disruptive event that could perhaps be an opportunity. But if you can't do these two things, I don't think you can justify a risk management initiative focused on the third thing. So that's my message. Risk management today is still immature. There isn't any one right way to proceed. There's all kinds of frameworks out there that can give you some guidance. But the basic fact is it's not that tough. It's relatively simple. And what we've had a problem with is boiling the ocean and finding all kinds of risks that have really nothing to do with value and try to organize them and sort them and get business people involved in them. So that's the message I have, and it's really a fairly simple one. Don't make it complicated. If you start with the right place, it'll probably bring you to the right conclusion. And you should really learn from your risk management initiative and your risk management practice. So you'll get a copy of this. These are 10 questions, and you can consider these 10 questions as questions that I think are 10 things that you can consider when you're answering the previous 3 questions. These are characteristics, in my view, of a successful risk management program. You'll notice I haven't used the word software anywhere in this presentation, I don't think. Try to scrub it out of here. Software can enable it, but unless you get the basic things right, you'll find that software can perhaps help you, with some of these particular questions here. But the problem with risk management isn't software, it's implementation, and it's the strategy you use and where you practice it. So I'll let you look at those questions individually and consider them in your particular case. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bob.
Thank you, Bruce.
I'll get out of your way.
It's nice that Bruce can talk about the macro, but I'm the feet on the street having to do what he's talking about. I'm the Governance, Risk, and Compliance Officer for SAP Americas, so both North America and Latin America. Not only risk management, but I also have Sarbanes-Oxley testing and what we call strategic security, crisis management, and business continuity planning underneath my umbrella. So I'm going to go through a couple of things here. Basically, risk management trends. This is sort of the way we see the world. Obviously, every industry is a little different. Some trends may have a more pertinent factor, but at the end of the day, there are trends and then sort of prerequisites to be successful in risk management. We're going to talk a lot about strategic risk management because that's the focus of the agenda. But I'm also going to talk about sort of how the operational risk management and the strategic risk management sort of meet in the middle. We'll talk a little bit about how our organization is set up, and then also I'm going to show a little bit about the transparency of risk information. So risk trends. I think everyone, CFOs or other functions will look at these things and say, yeah, overall economic and political conditions, SAP does business in 130 countries around the world. So be it Egypt, be it whatever, you have to worry about the political unrest, the economic conditions of those countries. Regulatory changes, it could happen based upon we are filing in the US on the US Stock Exchange, but we're a German-based company. So we have requirements from all over the world. Increasing competition and profitability pressures, absolutely. I think all companies are in there. Some of the ones that we've seen a little bit more and we have to worry about are the cyber threats, threats to information. I think you saw something in the paper about IBM fairly recently had a leak of information. It's not necessarily cyber, but it was a leak of information outside of the company. And then for particularly SAP, the speed of disruptive technologies, looking at cloud, a bunch of the vendors out there, including SAP, everybody's pushing to the cloud. For SAP, it's also mobility, it's also big data. So we have these trends, which means that we have to focus on different activities. But we in risk management, I think if people sat in on Mike's presentation before us, we have to try to get the interdependencies and the interrelationships of all these different risks. So what's that mean from a risk management perspective? It means that we have to expand our outside-in view. It's not only internal. SAP's been on this journey of risk management for over 10 years now, and we started out very much spreadsheet-based, tell me your top 5 pain points, and we tried to do a risk assessment. Then we started doing more operational risk management, looking at projects, looking at opportunities that we had to make sure that they were priced right, that we had the right resources to staff the project, etc. And then 5 or 6 years into that, we then said, no, we got to do more strategic, top down, tie it to the objectives of the overall company, and do a lot more in the way of reviews from the top down. So again, outside-in factors, looking at risk trends, combining operational and strategic risk management, and then trying to get the trends. So it took us, as a company, it took us from being, I would say, purely operational focus and very compliance focus. Sort of check the box, you've got to do a risk assessment on an opportunity or a project, to where we got engaged with the business. So we became much more embedded into the business. And on one of the slides, I'll talk about sort of our organization and my team. We try to get the risk managers to be business enablers. Not again, check the box, just do risk management, ask a couple of questions, go on to the next person. But get them engaged in the business, make sure they understand the business and help the business. So senior business people. My team, I have a team of 20 in the Americas, doing all those different functions. I would say the least amount of experience I have is probably in the 10 to 12 year range. And I have people upwards of 30 years of business experience, including myself. And again, it's business experience. Not only, I'm finance by my background, finance and operations, but we have consulting people, we have project managers, we have salespeople, we have people from finance. So we have a plethora of different talents on our team, and that is the same worldwide for SAP. So again, trying to get closer collaboration with the business, and then moving more along the strategic priorities of the company to achieve the objectives of the overall company. So what does that mean from a sort of critical success factors? You need to have the push from the top down. It's got to be the culture of your company has to be top down driven. We started, again, 10 years ago with an email from the board saying, we're going to do risk management. And it was the old, okay, I'm from risk management, I'm here to help you. And it was, okay, I'll get back to you in 2 or 3 months. Over the years, we basically built it grassroots up to try to prove the value to the business, working with individual business people in different businesses, both be it field or in our product development group, in our marketing area. So again, working from the bottom up so that they could see the value. The right organizational setup. Yes?
Yeah, you know, talking about value, how are you measuring the value, and how are you, you know, I mean, because this is a hard thing for me to measure, get my head around is, how does an ERM program provide value, and how do you measure that?
Yeah, it's quite difficult, that question. We struggle with it. What we do is more looking at it from looking at the profitability of our overall, say, consulting line of business, the number of escalations of bad projects, margin leakage on a project. So we look at things, we can't add it up to a number that says we saved the company $50 million. But again, what we try to do is get those business people to understand we're helping them to avoid margin leakage. And when we talk about top-down and strategic, it's working with the board members and letting them know that we're looking at the overall strategy and then trying to do a 360-degree holistic assessment of what the strategy is, what the business case looks like, what the external factors are that are impacting that. But there is no silver bullet on the value, unfortunately. If it was, I think we'd probably be able to double our head count.
Do you have particular metrics that you measure yourself on, or is it just...
Again, we look at the profitability of projects and opportunities, and again, the overall SAP strategy. So no, nothing in particular. From an organizational setup, we started on a decentralized basis. The risk managers all reported in hard line to the business. And then sort of in the 2007 time frame, We are part of the CFO organization, which you'll see on the next slide. There was too much pressure put on the risk managers by having them report into the business people. So the CFO wanted it pulled out, wanted them still embedded, still sitting in the same buildings with the people, but reporting dotted line into the business and reporting straight line into a risk management organization, which reports into the CFO organization. Again, a tailored risk management approach. We got into this top-down strategic and bottoms-up operational. We call it end-to-end risk management. So you can see what's going on from the outside. But honestly, you can talk about strategy all you want, unless you're understanding what's happening feet on the street, the operational trends, and being able to filter that up to the strategic guys, there's a disconnect. So if you're doing great in one of the two, okay, but if you're doing great in both of them, it's going to help your business a lot more. And then again, a changed role of the risk manager. We really want extensive business experience for these people, particularly SAP people. We don't like to go to the outside and hire a fresh risk manager unless they were doing risk management in a similar type of technology company. Because, yeah, everybody can learn how to do a risk analysis, but it's really understanding the business and being able to provide that value to the company. So again, that's sort of where we're at. So this is our organization. Sorry, it's a little small, but we are reporting into the CFO of the group. There's a head of risk management, or the GRC in Germany, who is my direct boss. I have counterparts in each of the regions, Asia Pacific and EMEA, EMEA being split. But we also have a SOX team, a security team over there. But we are set up a little different than some companies. We have our compliance group outside of the GRC. So our compliance group goes up through legal, I think primarily because we have mostly lawyers in the compliance group, so they go up via the lawyers. And we have internal audit separated out, pulled out, reporting directly into the CEO function. So an overall GRC function, we are about 105 people worldwide, again, handling security, handling SOX, and handling risk management. So again, what we try to get is this balance. When we were decentralized versus centralized, get this balance of being a business partner. Again, trying to help the business understand their risks, understand the mitigation plans that they have to put in place, while at the same time we have stewardship within the company. The CFO very much likes the fact that we have an independent set of eyes from the business. We're with the business, but we have an independent reporting structure. So if anybody on my team doesn't like what they're hearing and the business isn't listening to sort of help mitigate the risks, then at least we have an avenue of communication up via the CFO organization, independent. But again, we very much try to be very dovetailed into the business. So what I talked about a little bit is this top-down and bottom-up approach. So strategic risk management, looking at the overall industry trends, initiatives of the company. As I said, with SAP, it's big data, it's mobility, it's the cloud, for example. And then the bottom-up risk management is really looking at projects, looking at opportunities, looking at development of products, making sure that when we put a product out to general availability, it doesn't have a lot of holes in it, it's got the right functionality, etc. So again, bottoms up, top down, we call it end-to-end risk management. So let's talk a little bit about strategic risk management. So again, to help enable decision making, you got to look at sort of the outside-in information. So external events, the competition, the economy, what's going on outside of our business, for us to be able to say, okay, what do we need to do about it? Because if we don't stay lockstep with what's going on outside the organization, we can get run over. In a technology company, you can get run over pretty quickly. So we have to be very careful that you don't get run over by a disruptive technology. So you got to sort of stay ahead of the curve a little bit. At the same time, you have these internal factors. Do we have the right people, right? Do we have the teams all aligned to execute on that overall strategy? And at the end of the day, we have to make sure there's compliance. So we just can't run willy-nilly around, but we have to make sure that we're compliant. I'm not going to go through this in detail. Again, as Bruce said, you'll get slides. But again, this is just looking at, okay, trying to identify and have visibility of risks related to our targets, our overall strategy, our targets. Again, going around to different risk scenarios, trying to stress what our business plans are, what the strategy is, and then keep on going around and looking at external trends, what's going on that's going to impact that strategy overall. And then we call it internal predictions. This is trying to guess the unknown, which if I could do that, I wouldn't be standing here. I'd be rich somewhere else. But again, trying to use all the collaborative information, and we do use tools like periodically wisdom of the crowd, so you can sort of get a lot of people to give their opinions on a topic. We found that works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. So again, these are the tools and services that we sort of use. To get an outside-in view, we have a competitive marketing group, and we also obviously are dovetailed into all the analysts in the community. There are a lot of analysts that follow SAP, as well as other business analysts, so we can get that outside-in information. Again, we try to use this, the innovative tools, the wisdom of the crowd type of tools. I'm not the biggest fan of that, to be honest with you, but it is something that we've tried. And again, it's just something that it doesn't work for every company. It doesn't work for every risk or every situation. And the biggest thing here is really the third one, is the holistic, trying to identify the opportunities and risks, a 360-degree review. We have, in the strategic risk management team, we have 6 people dedicated to probably not many more topics than 6 strategic topics. So these people are out touching the highest levels of the organization and doing a holistic 360-degree review of people in product development, people in the go-to-market strategy, people in the field, in the services organization. Again, trying to get information, trying to get trends, trying to get patterns of information, of those things that will significantly impact the organization. And very important, as Bruce was saying, and Mike before us in the presentation before, you got to try to get the interdependencies of these different risks. Maybe some of them are stacked on top of each other, some of them might be independent. So again, a little different approach. It starts really starting at the strategy development. You've got to look at it and risk adjust it. You've got to look at your strategy and say, okay, does it sort of make sense from a risk perspective? Then you build your business cases, your financial models and stuff like that. Again, you got to sort of stress them. You got to run them through sort of a risk discussion. Then you go out and try to execute on your strategy, and you've got to have KPIs and other things that you're tracking against, and then you adjust your strategy. And again, it's sort of a circle that keeps on going round and round, particularly on topics that are multi-year topics. And when you think about strategy, they are multi-year topics most of the time, at least with us. Okay, but that's all nice. That's all the top-down. But you can't get the information unless you're talking to sort of the feet on the street. You can't get the information unless you do it from also the bottoms up. So we get information in the sales and consulting organization, high-risk scenarios, early warning KPIs. Again, we can look at product trends. We use our own system that we're able to see information on a different product or on a different industry or a different customer. We also have what we call a risk delegation of authority. So talking about risk appetites, we've set up a matrix. Things can be handled at a local level, but once the risk values start going up, there's different approvals that are needed for be it a sales opportunity, a consulting opportunity, or even in the way of strategy, strategic projects. And then we also have implemented worldwide what we call executive risk committees. We have these pretty much at almost all the country levels, the bigger countries, and if not the countries at a market unit level, which may be a combination of countries, but this is where you discuss the risks. So sort of, this is more the operational risks, as opposed to the strategic risks are discussed at the board level, there with the strategy group. So this is where you're trying to get relevant stakeholders to be involved in the mitigation activities, et cetera. So again, the outcome is you're prepared to react faster to external trends and factors. You have a combination that's effective of operational risk management as well as strategic risk management. Again, a higher return on investment. It's arguable how you really measure that, but again, if the board is happy, then generally we're happy as well. And the most important thing is this whole thing right here is getting a risk-aware culture. So again, people now, when it's, hey, I'm from risk management, I'd like to talk to you, it's not like they say, call me back in 3 months. It's, I'll get back to you tomorrow, or let's have a conversation. And I got probably about 8 minutes now. Just 2 more slides. All of that's really, really great, but you need to have transparency of risk information. You need to be able to accumulate it. And again, you can accumulate it. There's a bunch of different software packages out there, as Bruce said. You can accumulate it on an Excel spreadsheet depending upon how many risks you're attempting to track. We happen to use our own product that's out there that we're able to accumulate risks worldwide. So we can have risk managers in all the different places around the world, and we're able to accumulate information for our 20F and annual report. Risks are put into the system. They're validated by activity owners. So whoever owns the risk and the mitigation response has to validate to the business that these are the right risks and the right mitigation. We do provide monthly reporting to our key stakeholders on an operational basis. And on a quarterly basis, we provide a board report that goes through the key strategic risks, and they are discussed as needed with the board members. There's also obviously ad hoc discussions with the board members as part of those ERC processes to make sure that we have the right mitigation activities in place. And we are moving from a pushing out of information to a more consume-on-demand model. So we have developed an iPad application that ties into our system that in the near future, you see a bunch is still under construction, but we're putting together basically a GRC function that has risk management. It'll have process controls, which is effectively our SOX testing, and continuous monitoring of our Sarbanes-Oxley controls. So if there's exceptions, they'll be kicking out to the appropriate people for follow-up. We have audit tied into that as well, and then compliance in the near future. Again, the compliance office and the audit function are independent of the GRC, but we're going to have it on one iPad. And what we're doing is so when I click on my map, I get a heat map. I'm able to see, and this is not factual data, I'm able to see if I want to click on the highs, I can get all the high risks for my organization. I can click on that and it expands it and gives me some text, it gives me some risk analysis information as well. I can sort on this thing by risk owner, I can sort on by country. Again, this map is done at the world, so if a board member is going to a country, he could click on Canada, see what Bruce is doing up in Canada, and see the risks from a project perspective, from a country risk perspective, et cetera. So I think we're sort of at the end, but we probably have, what, Emma, 5 minutes or so? Any questions, specific questions? Yes, for Bruce or myself.
So assuming over the last 5-6 years that this has been implemented at SAP, do you have any numbers of like before and after, in the sense how either transformed the records that you're looking at in a better sense?
Some of that is confidential information, but I would say our project escalations are down. Our profitability in our services organization is up. Again, it could be better project management. It could be a lot of different factors. So I'm not taking credit for any of that, to be honest with you. But it's not going the other way around, because at one time we had a year where we had a bunch of escalations. And I won't tell you how much time we spent in the way of root cause analysis to try to understand, is it something that we should have caught up front, or is it just something that garbage happens, right? So if it happens, it happens. As long as it wasn't something that was a breakdown in the process that we should have caught up front. If it happens down the road, so be it. If you can learn that earlier, then yeah, you can still save money. Even if a project goes bad, we can save money if we know about it 2 months earlier before we have a burn rate of 60 more days. So that's as close as I can get to sort of proving the value.
This might be a question for Bruce. Outside of SAP, who of your clients or anybody that you know of does risk management from?
I can give you a very current example. There's a company in South Africa called XRO, EXXARO. If you go to the website and look at their integrated report, you will see probably the best example of, you just look at the report.
The
Public company in South Africa. And the reason I mentioned South Africa, well, they are South Africa, but South Africa has extremely high governance standards, and it's quite innovative in its risk management practices. I can send you the link if you. Sure, I can send you the link, but
yeah, I mean, it seems like there's you know, it's I don't know much about it. My involvement in risk is the financial market risk, corporate insurance, and stuff. And it seems like it's grown up out of audit. Yeah, but it's really much more. You know, sort of should start really with the board, obviously, which represent shareholders who may have been.
The best parts of that are being top-down driven.
Yeah.
A lot of them are driven out of the compliance office. XRO, which is a mining company, primarily a coal mining company, not a huge company, but a coal mining company, is driven out of the compliance office. It's driven by sustainability initiatives and strategies, partly. It's really an excellent example. Another one that you don't see because we don't report it is GSK. Pharmaceutical division of GSK, the vaccine division of GSK. I don't know if they published on the subject, but there was conference papers they presented recently that we could get you a copy of.
I mean, I don't see a lot of equity analysts, for example. You talk about the value of oil and gas and reserves, makes perfect sense, but I don't see equity analysts asking questions about risk-adjusted anything.
Standard & Poor's, as you probably know, the
rating
initiative
agencies,
is
yeah, but their credit rating agencies do pay attention.
Credit rating. So you don't see, I mean, but what you see equity analysts looking at is they focus in on where value is. This is what's driving that value. I don't think the risk management profession has had an awful lot to offer them, frankly, up to this point in time. I think there's an obvious connection, but I think it's an immature profession. Risk managers managing risk in accounts payable. They should be managing risk in something a little more substantial. But there are some examples out there of good programs. And I've mentioned a couple, and I'll give you some. I wish I could say they're all employees proliferating, going every day, but they're not. That's why I find the practice so interesting from a marketing perspective and having been a practitioner to see what we need to do it should be, it's good. Everybody thinks, the survey said people think it's important, it's getting more important, but how do you do it? And I think we've messed it up.
So what would you say are the top 3 reasons? So what would you say are the top 3 reasons that these companies are not moving?
I don't think they're focusing on value. I don't think they're looking at the right risks. I think they're overly complicated. I think they use a control-focused approach. I think they're really calling it risk management, but it's really control management. If you don't know more about you add up how many risks you've got and how many controls you've got, I tell people you should know 3 times as much about your risks as your controls. Generally, it's the other way around. I've got 1 risk and I got 5 controls stacked up there, and it will smother that risk if it ever happens. I would reverse that ratio. There's a couple of reasons. I don't think it's collaborative. I don't think the auditing, accounting, or risk, or many professions don't really rely on the value of the people on the field. There's all kinds of tools that people are in fact using for risk management that are collaborative tools. Survey tools. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Let's gather information and analyze it. So I don't think that we should look to this. And I've seen other successful risk management initiatives as well. I would suggest you go to the North Carolina State Enterprise Risk Management website. They've got all kinds of papers. They've got twice a year round tables, another one coming out in November. And you get some excellent case studies on risk management in that organization. So take a look at that. And I've seen those presentations, and they don't talk about software. They just basically, the best ones I've seen don't necessarily use any kind of sophisticated software. I think eventually they will, but they use survey tools, voting technology, that sort of thing. And eventually, you know, the kind of stuff that big solution parties like myself sell might be useful. But they're not using key risk indicators. They're not using any of that stuff. They're just gathering information in an intelligent manner.
I think Emma's giving us the hook. I'll stay around for a little bit yet, and Bruce will if you have any additional questions. I think Emma would look for the survey form that you guys have, and we very much appreciate you stopping in for our session.